Hello and welcome to the launch of the Insurtech 100 2022. My name is Matt Connolly. I'm the CEO of Sønr, the market intelligence company behind the Insurtech 100. So I'd like to start today, first of all, by congratulating all of those companies that are listed in the 100. So that's no mean feat, especially due to the economic circumstances that we find ourselves in, but also the amount of funding that is being pumped and poured into creating new insurtechs around the world. I'd also like to extend a thanks to all the judges who helped us score the long list of companies that we settled upon and have helped us rank the 100. So let's dive in to a little bit of conversation. So I'm joined today by Chris Payne and Penny Froling from EY. Chris, Penny, lovely to have you on board with us today.
Thank you, Matt.
Pleasure.
Great to be here.
Lovely. Now, I'm excited about this year's report. So the market has changed significantly over the past few months. The performance of insurtech stocks globally has been, let's go with underwhelming, to say the least. But I think that's pretty true more broadly of fintech stocks as a whole. The economy is grinding to a halt, slowing down and crashing around us, something along those lines. And yet we're also seeing incumbents maturing from an innovation perspective and settling on strategies to get from A to B a little bit faster than possibly previously. So what does all this mean to those leading insurtechs out there? And this is what the Insurtech 100 is all about, a celebration of these great companies that we're seeing out there. And it's probably worth saying from an insurtech perspective, or maybe a phrasing perspective, we're coming at insurtech with the broadest possible lens. So these are businesses that are changing the face of insurance. So we've gone from tens of thousands down to a ranked 100. So for the second year running, EY are our partners in exploring this. We've collectively been working on this for a few months, doing a whole load of research. Maybe if I could ask Chris and Penny a quick introduction from yourselves, and maybe just explain a little bit about your role within EY as well. And Chris, maybe I could start with you.
Yeah, sure, Matt. Thank you. Chris Payne, as you introduced, I lead our go-to-market activities for insurance technology at EY across EMEA, and that's really centering on 2 or 3 key areas. I mean, of course, we're pretty well known in the market for our transformation capabilities of helping organisations kind of re-platform their technology estates. But I think one of the big areas I've really been focusing on in the last few years has been this whole area, Matt, of insurtech and innovation. And I think what we've seen is this shift from the traditional re-platforming to insurers actually now looking to deploy technology and innovation and embed that together in a very, very different way. And hence that's been a really exciting thing to focus in on. So that's very much my role.
Lovely. And Penny?
Penny Froling. I lead up our corporate strategy practice for EY Parthenon, focusing primarily on the insurance sector. So that ranges from life and pensions and health all the way through to P&C as well as specialty insurance. And what I do is I work with clients in helping them navigate disruptive change in order to achieve very significant growth goals. And I think there's a very common theme throughout the insurance sector right now, which is how do I grow? Mm-hmm. And the market has been increasingly challenging. I mean, we know about the pricing market in terms of what's going on in specialty insurance. We know that longevity risk has been increasing in the life space. The automotive sector is going through massive transformational exogenous factors, which is making it very challenging for them to make money. And the whole insurtech area is a way by which they can think about actually creating value, driving growth, extracting margin. So we've seen a very, very big shift, I think, over the past 5 years from we're going to just, passively invest in insurtechs as a way of incubating to how do we much more proactively develop a ecosystem of insurtech partners that enable us to execute much more fastly enable us to be more competitive without having to build everything ourselves. And that, I think, is a very big mental shift that has happened in the insurance sector over the past 5 years.
And Penny, I'll just build on that. I think I fully agree, by the way. I think the shift has been most of what we've seen over the last 5, 10, perhaps 15 years has been foundational technology transformation. So it's actually been that focus on trying to move from legacy to newer modern tech. What I think we're now seeing is a further shift from there, and I think it's reflected in some of the data within the Sønr 100, which is that a lot of the technology now is going to be and we're seeing more centered around, and the investments will be reflected in how does that technology actually enable that growth? How do you actually link the technology to customer experience, new value proposition? These are the big challenges. These are the big gorillas that the insurers are wrestling with. And time will tell, but that's not going to be easy. But I think that the technology and the Insurtechs that we're seeing, a lot of it is actually reflecting that shift from foundational to sort of customer-driven tech, in my view.
Yeah.
Can I lead with a question that we haven't talked through in any of our preceding chats? So it's always going to be a dangerous one. But so what we know around the Insurtech landscape is you have some exceptional founders who are incredibly ambitious and hungry to scale their businesses in a way that we haven't seen before. All right. So there's a narrative in the industry around funding rounds to enable them to scale, and everybody is somewhat and maybe rightly obsessed with how much money is being put into these Insurtechs to achieve the scale. Coming back to the introduction of yours, Penny, and you talk about working with insurance companies who strive for growth. I just want to sort of challenge that just a little bit, just to really explore. Do you see the incumbent landscape? So those insurers that have been around for hundreds of years, do you see their ambitions for growth as we're seeing with Insurtechs? Because what I'm really interested in is we will make it a mandate of ours at Sønr. We only work with ambitious companies, and what we mean by that is we also see many companies out there who are resting on their laurels, who haven't yet focused upon that innovation journey themselves. Now, without talking about clients and non-clients, just at a sort of general kind of industry-wide level, are you seeing that ambition for growth truly reflected out there from the incumbents, or is it now suddenly maybe even awakening up to how these Insurtechs are coming through at scale, changing the landscape, and therefore they need to wake up and grow?
I think Matt. I think that's a really, really excellent question. I do think that an Insurtech as a privately held company with no shareholders and stock price that they need to look at and monitor on a quarterly basis, they have a different set of stakeholders that they need to be managing. I also think that the concept of growth is a very different paradigm, if you will, between an Insurtech and a major global insurer, and the way you would measure that would be quite different. So all of the major insurance companies that we speak to, regardless of the sector that they operate in, are all looking for ways to grow, acquire new clients, retain more assets in what is fundamentally a very, very saturated, low growth market. So when you look at major product categories in P&C, motor or home or pet, these are sectors that are growing only at probably 2 to 3 to 4% annually. So the issue is how do you think about getting a step change in that level of growth, which means that you are taking share from your competition, is very challenging. Or in the case of things like specialty insurance, you need to be thinking about dominating brand new risk pools. So renewables and things like that. Cyber is a very big one. I think that's growing at around circa 30 to 40%. Parametrics is another. All of this is growing off of a low base. The challenge is can your do you have the risk appetite to take on those pools? So yes, I see Insurtechs growing and growing and growing. They have an imperative to do so because of the private capital that's coming in and the appetite of the VCs and the private equities to say you need to achieve a year-on-year quantum of growth or we pull your funding.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a very, very different paradigm. And we also can't forget the fact that many of these Insurtech companies have yet to really turn a profit,
Sure.
which is why I think we've seen a bit of there's been a bit of noise and healthy tension and constructive pressure to say the age of the business model of we just keep pouring money in, waiting for some degree of revenue. I think the tolerance level for that has mitigated, as it did in the dot-com bust, of course. That's all completely rational, but we are seeing a little bit of pressure ramp up there.
Yep. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, building on that, two or three reflections. I think one is, to your last point, Penny, we've certainly seen some examples of, the bright Insurtechs of perhaps a few years ago where insurers have come in and actually bought, IP and kind of assets at pretty good value, shall we say. I think in terms of this point about sort of growth and ambition, I mean, of course, there's a massive market out there that is still not tapped in terms of insurance opportunities. I think cyber is obviously the hot one at the moment, where we are seeing that focus. But overall, I think in terms of ambition, the tier ones clearly have shown ambition to get more involved in Insurtech, to use different vehicles to invest around and so on. I think so. There's a little bit of a split in the market that I see, which is that the bigger players absolutely, for different reasons. I mean, they have funding and capability to do it. They have deeper pockets. So they are exhibiting more ambition around innovation and creating that linkage with Insurtechs. I think there's also a large body of what I call sort of tier 3, tier 4s, almost waiting for the lights to be turned off, who aren't showing that ambition, who are saying, actually, I'm kind of here, I do this, and I'm betwixt and between. I'm not big enough to shape and influence, and I've not really established a clear growth strategy for my future business or survival. What am I going to be in the future? And I think there's a lot of players that have just kind of are waiting for an inevitable, which will be disappearance or takeover or whatever that might be.
I love the phrase "waiting for the lights to be turned off." It's it's very true. Yeah. Well, look, let's dive back and focus on the Insurtechs, because that's what we're here to talk about. Insurtech 100.
Sure.
So thank you for the segue. Thank you for appeasing me in the segue rather than taking me there. Chris, your thoughts on the Insurtech 100 itself? So there is a real spotlight. Penny's alluded to the fact that funding's drying up, valuations are down. There's a real conversation that is taking place right now around Insurtechs that are out there, and based on the crazy numbers of engagement around the Insurtech 100 last year, I can only imagine the focus is going to be even greater this year on what we're creating from this report and what we've published today. Chris, your views on the Insurtech 100, its importance in the market, its relevance in the market. I'd be just really interested to hear that kind of broader context.
Well, I think it's massively important. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we, this is year 2. We're really pleased to be part of this movie, Matt. I think that the importance has to me has been amplified. I mean, I think of sort of 12 months ago, and I think of now. When you look at that 100, there are some players within that are really, now quite significant businesses that are really, really establishing themselves and scaling globally, and I think that's really impressive. I think by the same token, you've also got a lot of new blood coming in, which I think is also encouraging, where you're seeing that focus across, real innovation across the 3 subsectors. There's some exciting stuff there and I think the importance from an EY point of view is that, our clients are very, very interested in understanding, the trends and the movements in the market, and they don't have time. They have the day job. So I think the importance of the 100 is on a couple of levels. One is, I think it's a brilliant summary and go-to source really for summarizing, that kind of top 100, the ones that you should be aware of and looking out for, that maybe you should be thinking about how these can bring value to your business, your customers. So I think there's that point. And then I think it's just simply that the way the trends in the market are going, and the way organisations are trying to create value, you know, these Insurtech organisations are a central component of that. We are moving away from the sort of monolithic platform focus to, you know, true solutions that can bring true value to customers. So I think this focus around customer value, customer proposition, this is, thank God, really kicking in now, and I think it just amplifies the importance of these players, and of course, certainly from an EY point of view, our role in helping organisations to sort of understand and harness that value.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think the one important thing I'd probably add to that is there is so much going on beyond the 100 as well.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
absolutely. Let's keep that focus on the 100, and as I say, we're here today to look at that. But it's that broader landscape which I think is incredibly interesting, and in particular when you're looking at these 100, these are those that demonstrate the successes of the industry and within the industry. And Penny, you know, to your point about kind of the economic focus, sort of, or maybe attention around the economy right now and the impact it has on the wider Insurtech landscape. It's really interesting looking from an analysis perspective on the investment in particular that's gone into these 100, and particularly sort of over the last couple of years, because they are still attracting some very big rounds.
Capital.
And I think you know, we've cut it a little bit, but cut the data, excuse me, a little bit. But the majority of these businesses are sort of Series C and above. Even though we have, I think there's one business, Lamy Technologies, you know, who's still at seed stage, right? So you know, super that they're able to, you know, be part of this 100. But the majority are, as Chris said, you know, well-established businesses. How are you, and what are you kind of noticing, or where are you thinking from in EY, but also from the 100 perspective around how does that economic environment affect businesses like we're seeing in the 100? And are there any things that sort of jump out at you when looking through the list of companies from a kind of financing, from an investment, from a also kind of future direction perspective?
Well, I mean, a lot of nuances to that question, Matt. There's a lot there. So, I mean, the first observation would be that despite the economic environment, there's 700 million of incremental capital flowed into these, you know, the top players in 2022. So if 2021, you know, in the top 100, we saw about 1.5 billion of investment into the top 100. This year, we saw 2.2 billion going into the top 100. So if 2021 was the era of COVID, or the year of COVID, and the Insurtech 100 kind of being developed under that cloud of COVID and work from home and that immense uncertainty, this year I think is kind of defined by, or obviously defined by, one, the Ukraine war causing massive instability and uncertainty, as well as some pretty catastrophic, or the continuation of catastrophic weather events, particularly fire and flood and hurricane and things like that. That environment has not dented the capital flowing into these Insurtech companies. It's actually increased, and that might be slightly counterintuitive to some of the doom and gloom things we've heard about the financial markets and the massive declines. You know, NASDAQ being a classic example of just, you know, the tech bellwether absolutely taking a massive pounding. There's a few things that I've noticed about the companies in the top 100, having tried to delve into each one of them with a fine degree of detail. Founders are incredibly well-connected group of individuals, even younger companies who are still at kind of the Series A, or people who are serial entrepreneurs who have built other fin or Insurtechs, have exited them incredibly successfully, and now are deploying, you know, all of that expertise into these new businesses. They know what they're doing, and they know how to scale. And people are very, very prepared to give them that capital because of their connections and their track record. So that's one observation. Again, we see this preponderance of companies. It's over half of them are U.S.-based companies. that is not coincidental from our point of view, simply because the depth of the private capital market in the United States is unparalleled globally. So the U.S.-based companies are just simply those that are accessing that U.S.-based, very sophisticated capital to grow. There's some other companies that we noticed in the 100, and particularly the top 10. They're scaling very quickly. That might be based in Asia, but actually they're completely global companies run by, a very, very diverse global team. So I mean that these are very interesting things. I just, to Chris's point, I just think the maturity and the sophistication of these companies and the scale of these companies, we think, has probably taken a very massive leap over the past few years. But be interested in your observations, Matt, because you've been living and breathing this top 100 list for how long now?
Well, it's the fourth year,
Okay.
and it is. I think that's one of the real joys that I get from my job. I mean, it sounds a little bit random every October to say that, but it's is being able to make that year-on-year comparison, and I love it particularly. And let's kind of keep with that global aspect. So we track. It's really important for us as a European head office business, albeit we have clients from Japan to South America, all over the world. That our data is truly global. There is no bent to the US market or to Australian market or wherever it is. It's a truly global data set tracking millions of companies across all sectors. It's just we happen to work in insurance only.
Yeah.
And it's that the changes on a global level really interest me, and that kind of the maturing markets versus less mature markets. So so the very fact we have representation from Africa, in the Insurtech 100, again, amazing. I'm delighted about that, because it's such it's a market with such opportunity and growth potential, because it's sadly incredibly underserved. But just the same with South America, these are markets that we're going to hear more and more and more of over the coming years. And whilst I would love to get away from the fact that 49% of the Insurtech 100 is US companies, and I'd love to kind of be showcasing more European businesses. It's fair and just, and it's independent, from my view, and that's partly the great thing about this. I think there's an interesting sat around the kind of the APAC representation. So only, I think last year there were 4 businesses in the top 10 that were from Asia Pacific. Interestingly, there were only 2 in the top 10 this year. What does that tell us about both the economical situation, but also kind of the innovation aspects that we see out there? And actually, I think there is still an incredible amount going on in. If we look more broadly, 18 of the 100 come from APAC, and that still excites me. It's still a good percentage of this industry, and I don't think we should shy away as individuals working with incumbents from looking at that global innovation perspective, and thinking that a startup that might be the right partner or investee or whatever it be the company next door to you is a myth. It's let's look at innovation as a truly global opportunity to accelerate a business or advance a business. So having that global aspect, I think, is really interesting. I think also another really interesting thing is looking at what makes up the Insurtech 100 from a B2B or B2C perspective, because there's a lot of narrative in the industry around Insurtechs are really, for the last few years, they've only really been a B2C proposition. So, and lots of the lemonades and the hippos have been, very kind of front of mind for everybody. And maybe, Chris, I put this one to you, is what we're seeing is a pretty even split between B2B and B2C. And over the years, we've absolutely seen a rise in this kind of B2B models. And part maybe what you were saying around incumbents recognizing the opportunity to partner with businesses that are designed to work with them to accelerate their business.
Yeah.
What are you seeing from a maybe a broader technology perspective, as well as the kind of split B2B, B2C?
I think that, and there's absolutely a strong link there, Matt. So thanks for the prompt. Without doubt, some of the more mature players. I mean, I've sort of seen certainly some trends, particularly in the sort of life and health space. There's been some quite interesting, what I'd call white label players. Some of them are in the top 100 that have been coming to market and have been able to help organisations that are really shackled with legacy to take that leap. So they're creating quite compelling white label propositions, quite exciting stuff actually, particularly I think in the wellness space, and they're working with and attracting, you know, very, very big names. I mean, I'm you know, I think we can mention one or two client names. You know, the sort of Swiss Re's and the Cignas and people like this are embracing some of those types of solutions to take that leap, to drive that innovation. And you know, it would be much harder to do that within your own legacy estate. So I think there's definitely a speed element to that. And so for sure there's a trend there that if those things are being developed and the tech can be deployed more easily, you know, so we're seeing the link to, you know, more modular deployments of that technology. So it's really interesting how quickly you can get some of those businesses and ideas up and running, testing them with customers, because I think that's the other order of the day, is that people kind of want to, in the spirit of that innovation, to test these ideas quickly, you know, without the 3 to 5 year journey to build it ourselves. Let's get much more agile. Let's find a way with the right partner, to whether that be the innovation platform itself, or those two coming together and getting that out there and seeing whether the mud sticks. And I think that's a healthy move in my view within the market.
Yeah, one of the things that I did, building on your point, Chris, was if you look at these top companies that are, you know, effectively they're solving problems for the great and the good of the insurance sector through harnessing technologies that enable you to do things that you never ever could do before. And those are specific things around AI, machine learning, harnessing of massive data pools that you never have been able to do before. So what they are doing is they are enabling the big insurers to import capabilities very quickly to do things such as, how do you within 3 minutes underwrite a small business? You know, how do you in a very seamless way show a company where all the vulnerabilities of all of their online devices are, so that you can take preventative measures to avoid hacking, and then once it potentially happens, you can remediate those risks very quickly. So this whole thing around data analytics, robotics, is a brand new capability that solves massive problems for insurance companies and enables them to serve their large body of clients, whether they be end clients or whether they be brokers and MGAs and advisors as well. So I think we're just seeing a lot of partnership here.
Yeah, Penny, building on that, I think there's a really key point sort of within what you said, and that is that if you go back a few years, I think there was a plethora, and you'll have seen this, Matt, of insurtechs and things coming to market where actually they were presenting themselves kind of as a tool or a capability. So it was a tool with AI, it was a tool with intelligent automation capability. I think the shift that we've seen is that those things are now embedded in something that's 2 or 3 levels beyond, that's actually solving a distinct business problem or bringing distinct business value. So I think the days of saying, well, you know, we're an AI platform and we do this and we do that, it doesn't wash, it doesn't fly. And I think that the reflection in the 100 this year, say to the past, is that the winners are those that have actually evolved and developed that articulation of value very clearly for very clear segments, and saying, look, this is what we do. Yeah, we can evolve and do other things, but this is what we're going to be famous for, this is what we're going to build from. And I think that's a much more compelling thing for an insurer to hear than, you know, the answer is yes, what's the question? And I think if you go back 5 years, thinking of some of those insurtechs, that was their sales pitch. We can be anything you want us to be. And it's like, well, you know what? The insurers didn't know how to work with them, and now they do.
But I think, I mean, like to Penny, your point around the economy and the need for these businesses to demonstrate their ability to make money and, you know, demonstrate their unit economics and all the rest. It's you have now, you know, we're talking about the majority Series C and above. So not only is that articulation much more crisper and aligned, but also they're validating what they're putting out there, right? So they are now working with insurance companies, and they have those case studies that they can take to market, and that's where they're able to scale on a global basis because they're able to apply it again and again.
That is so important because, as Chris can attest, the big insurance companies are not going to take a punt on brand new, unproven technology. It's simply too risky for them, right, Chris?
Yeah, what they've done is they've waited.
Yeah.
And some of those that sort of burnt brightly are now not so much so. They've come in and they've said, hey, we'll have that.
Yeah.
But they didn't back them, say, 5 years ago when they were seeing them. In some cases, these players were seen as threats to those large incumbent players. So yes, I think there's still a big sort of risk mindset to this, Penny, around what they will invest in and what they will back and trust. So for sure, I think that's very fair.
And you've said a couple of things. All right, so let's go back to there's a plethora of insurtechs out there, and the change of narrative over the last 5 years, and then the acquisition of those who maybe weren't performing as well as they could and go out on their own, or alternatively just simply attractive opportunities for them. M&A is a big thing that we've seen within the Insurtech 100 this year, right? So a number of these Insurtechs are swallowing up either smaller Insurtechs, but actually also some kind of parts of the incumbent industry as well. Now, that's a trend that I'm really interested in, and I feel that we're going to see much more of over this coming 12 months. It'd be interesting to get your views on just kind of M&A more broadly, maybe what you're seeing with your clients, what you think we might see from an Insurtech 100 landscape. Are these ambitious entrepreneurs going to be using acquisition and the M&A strategy as a route for growth? Kind of, I imagine so, right? It's part of the beast. Equally, you're going to have a bunch of companies out there that are going to be much more affordable, let's say, than they've ever been.
Yeah, well, the strength of the dollar is
and
already what we are seeing. A lot of U.S. companies looking very, very hard at the U.K. and Europe in terms of acquisitions. But I think the way to look at acquisitions are, there's a couple different categories. One is you're acquiring capability, right, that is complementary, and I think we've seen a lot of that, over the past year. So, there's multiple examples of that. There is, I'm acquiring in order to expand into other countries. One of the large, one of the top 10 actually has made some very strategic acquisitions throughout Asia, for example. We've also seen, we had a Latin American top 100 making acquisitions to expand their footprint, and there's another German company that's doing the same thing. So there's that, there's the acquiring capabilities that are complementary, there's the market expansion capabilities. What we're not seeing so much of is I'm making acquisitions to buy clients, which is more of kind of the D2C model. We're not really seeing that yet. I don't think we particularly will. And because I think for the very clear reason that an Insurtech doesn't want to buy a incumbent company where there's old systems, and there's also a lot of potential risk and provisioning that needs to happen.
Yeah, I think there's factors around sort of culture and legacy. I mean, culture is absolutely key within these businesses. And it's often why they were sort of set up in the first place. It's because these people have got a really strong belief in something, and they want to create that within that organisation. So, yes, I mean, we are seeing trends, Penny, like, I don't know, I'll call it pet world domination. There's some really interesting trends in certain lines of business, and you can see the logic of why sort of pets used as a mechanism for driving kind of loyalty, connection, customer. Yeah. So I think that's one that's been around for a while. But no, I think the Insurtechs themselves are generally wanting to grow. They're more interested in sort of obtaining funding and access. They're not necessarily looking to acquire unless it is, something that's quite additive and fits with the existing business, but is not too big, to your point. And then, of course, we've touched on this point about the carriers themselves are absolutely acquiring IP and capability where they believe they can see value, and again they can do that more quickly than trying to build from within. Because of course I think we still are seeing it's too slow, and I think we've seen those models of the incubator models of the of the carriers. I'm not saying, of course, there are some that are still out there and some that have done some interesting things, but that actual sort of internal innovation incubator model hasn't really worked out. If I was to kind of give it marks out of 10.
Yeah, there was this whole trend of how major corporates should mentor startups, and it actually needs to be the other way around.
Yeah, it's
I think we have gotten out of that model. I also think it's why the kind of sandboxes and garages have all kind of died a death, because you actually need the Insurtechs to come in and inject that, the culture, the mentality, the agility, the lack of bureaucracy, all of that.
Well, one was to infuse capital, which was kind of the carrier to the sort of solution provider, but actually it's the solution provider infusing the creativity, the idea, the culture, the energy, and the kind of creativity and acumen. Because I think that's the thing that, again, if you look at the marketplace around sort of innovation, that's where you're really seeing the fires are really burning. It's from there, and I think carriers are recognizing that it's very, very hard to turn the oil tank around and change culture overnight. These organizations have this in spades, so I think that's the point.
Chris, I'm going to pick up on, I feel like you're the man who feeds me links. You talked about culture within these businesses. So one of the interesting things for me is around it's aligned with culture, but it's more sort of purpose, I guess, of these businesses. And Penny, there's an interesting thing we talked about last year, which was around one of the expectations or forecasts that you put forward was around the build of ESG and the importance of ESG. And what we're certainly seeing is a large increase in companies that have purpose at the core of their business, and a lot of those align to an ESG purpose. What are your thoughts and reflections looking at the 100 with an ESG lens at the moment? And again, would be interested in the past 12 months, but also what you expect to see over the coming year as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. Last year, one of the predictions we made was that we anticipated seeing a lot more health and well-being companies, and we noted the lack of health and well-being companies within the 100. That clearly has ripened, because there are a lot of them in the top 100. I think our prediction for next year is, from a ESG standpoint, particularly the E angle, is we would anticipate seeing more businesses that are helping insurers try to solve the problem of metrics tracking and reporting of net zero and biodiversity commitments. So the ability to apply a lot of this great AI and metrics and data analytics to solve the problem of data and reporting. So we would anticipate seeing that. I think the reason why we're not seeing it in the 100 is these businesses are far too new. And they're probably still at seed funding and Series A, but it's something that we definitely want to keep an eye on. There's another angle to this, which is the purpose-led company and wanting to work at a place that is not just about shareholder returns and the metrics, but also gives back. And we specifically, given this, the importance of this as a theme and something we've been seeing with our clients, our publicly traded clients, we specifically wanted to look at this and see who had strong purpose statements within the 100. And there is a significant number that have very prominent statements about purpose, ethics, diversity, and how they give back. And it's a very, very high percentage of them, and it is marked, actually. And there's one in particular that stood out to me that is very clear about making their net zero commitments absolutely core to what they do. They're planting trees. They have not yet translated that very specifically and tangibly to the propositions they're bringing to market. This is a P&C company focused on green. But, look, the starting position, I think, for a lot of this purpose-led and ESG-led businesses tends to be, as a corporate, you need to live and breathe that, and your net zero commitments and your carbon footprint and your diversity and your social giving back. And from there, it gets extended into the propositions.
Yeah, and I think that's there's one angle I'd maybe add, Penny, to everything you just said, which is that absolutely you're seeing that within the sort of the foundation stones, if you like, of these new exciting businesses. Absolutely, they're getting off and starting off on the right foot.
Yep.
So we're absolutely seeing that loud and hearing that loud and clear. I think what we haven't seen is really that evolution into proposition, to your point.
Yep.
And I think that's also a reflection of the market. It's the market maturity. We are, there's still a lot of noise, a lot of confusion in the marketplace around, we're at this stage of organizations trying to get their heads around what their actual strategy is to sort of net zero. There's this strong focus around sort of compliance and reporting and those aspects, and just trying to understand that and what they need to do by when. What we haven't seen is that sort of stage 2, stage 3 evolution, whereby you've got these Insurtechs, and I think we will see it in the next 2 years, Insurtechs coming in that are actually solving kind of more business problems or creating propositions linked to these offerings. I think great example I've seen is, yes, there's been 2 or 3 launches of carbon neutral motor propositions and stuff, but nothing like what I was expecting. And my expectation is that market with EV and the other environmental shifts, that to me would be a classic example of where I was expecting to see a lot more innovation in the UK motor market, and I haven't seen it. So I would expect that still to happen.
And I think you're both right. It is changing, but what we're looking at is those established players, and so you're bang on, Penny, with they're at the seed and the Series A stage, probably more at the seed stage. A lot of these businesses, so it's so much earlier stage, and then if we're taking sort of maybe 18 to 24 months per round for them to get up to the Series C, let alone actually where the Insurtech will have moved, 100 will have moved on by then. So it's maybe going to be another few years.
And they need to arrive when the market's ready.
Sure.
The market ain't ready for those types of solutions yet. Those carriers and so on. I think some of the consumers are, but the carriers need to understand what the consumers actually want, test that out, prove that, and then I think we'll see a radical shift of dynamics.
Yeah.
Really
the last observation, and kind of tying in with this kind of new breed of Insurtechs coming through, is the diversity observation again in the analysis that Penny, you and your team have pulled together, and again what is seriously lacking is diversity across these Insurtech 100, albeit it's better than it was last year, and I think that is a problem within our industry more broadly, and there's a lot of observation around this taking place at the moment. Are there any kind of thoughts and reflections? You mentioned these companies needing to be great companies to work at and attract talent a little earlier. Any thoughts and reflections sort of beyond that that you have around the diversity we're seeing across the Insurtech 100, and again expectations going forward?
Yeah, I mean, when I looked at a lot of the senior management teams within the top 100, they are universally very, very male. I think we have some depending on obviously the country where they're from. I think we are getting diversity in terms of ethnic mix. I think there's significant underrepresentation in African American, the black population. I'd love to see more of that, and women are very underrepresented in the 100. I think there's only 1 or 2 female-founded companies, and the whole concept of women and supporting women-founded businesses is near and dear to my heart, because I've been heavily involved in Angel Academy, since its founding, which specializes in women-led high-tech startups. Now, there maybe are there less women starting FS businesses? Maybe, but I think it's something that we need to keep a watching brief on, because it is proven that the more women in who are founders and senior managers, these businesses tend to have much more longevity and success. Another observation there is in some companies, there are women, who are part of the senior management team, but I would note it's much more of a exception than a standard at this point.
Yeah, I just echo we want it to change, and it's, even in these vibrant new businesses, probably we're not seeing as much as we would hope of that, of what we're all wanting to see, which is that diversity and that kind of new opportunity for these different segments.
Well, let's sorry, Penny.
Yeah, well, there is another dynamic as well. It is a fact that women often struggle with Silicon Valley to get their businesses funded, because there is inherent bias among the major funders in the United States against women. They just find it tougher to get funding, given the preponderance of obviously the capital pools, but also the United States businesses isn't naturally just a manifestation of what is a inherent bias in the system about women-founded businesses. I don't know, but it's definitely something I think we should monitor.
Yeah, and it certainly is. From a Sønr lens, we're absolutely tracking all of the data across this stuff, and we are seeing change, but my God, it's slow. And from my perspective, as a white middle-aged guy, all I can do is support the narrative and do what we're able to from a business perspective to help create that change, because it's going to be overly healthy for our industry to do so in so many ways. And really, from my personal interest, it's just to move the dial of change as fast as we possibly can. And I know that diversity will lend itself.
There's some, let's also say or state there's some great stuff going on. In terms of, I think the reality is, right, these things take a while. Some of them are generational or longer than that. There's some great schemes going on, Penny, the one you mentioned, Women in Tech. 5-10 years ago, there was nothing like that, nothing I'd seen.
Sure.
So, we've got people, great people winning awards right now. Only heard of one yesterday. So I think, there is I want to sort of light a slight candle of hope here.
I love the positivity. Yeah, good. No, and absolutely right. And we're seeing change already in the
everybody, right? There's very, very, very good intentions. It's just we need to keep vigilant, I think.
Right, and not wanting to bring it down again, but I'm going to. My final question. Let's turn this one into a positive, right? Please. But I'm going to start with again, just looking back on the world of change that we're in, right? So I've talked about it: suppressed valuations, difficulty to raise money. We're going to see a level of consolidation in the marketplace. There will be change afoot. Chris, maybe just sort of a final wrap up from your perspective. Just expectations over the next 12 months. Maybe with an Insurtech lens, but also sort of broader industry. What do you think we're going to experience? How are founders going to feel over this next 12 months? How might we see change afoot?
From an Insurtech perspective,
and broader.
I think that we're going to see some. I think we're going to see some sort of continued scaling and adoption of these some of these major players. So I think there's some positive signs for a number of them in that top 100 that are globalizing, scaling, doing really well. I think that kind of evolution of the kind of insurer/carrier Insurtech relationship, I think that's going to mature more. I think that the base technology is now more in place for those players to kind of work more effectively with Insurtechs. People are actually understanding what API layers are and how those can be leveraged. So I think the ease of the way the insurers, the carriers, and the Insurtechs work together is going to accelerate. So I think that's the positive bit. I think the bring it down bit, as you call it, Matt, is probably, I think without doubt there is going to be challenges around sort of prioritization within the insurers. You know, we're seeing some in the personal line space. We're seeing sort of, you know, profit warning type narratives. That's not a great moment to be innovating. You know, we see players that are, the change capacity of the big carriers is not limitless. You know, if your 10 major programs are all linked to kind of things like consumer duty and you know, fair pricing and all these other things, it doesn't leave much room for innovation and that whole Insurtech bit. So I think this balance between greater maturity and a recognition that you've got to move forward and start to think about proposition and customer a lot more if you want to grow, to your point, Penny. But I think there's also this real undercurrent that I am concerned about, which is that is all this other stuff, the macro environment and all the regulation, going to dominate in the next sort of 12, 18 months. So I think I'm hopeful, but I feel a little bit better if I look a little bit beyond that in terms of the time horizon of positivity.
Any final thoughts from your side, Penny?
Yeah, a couple. Chris mentioned, you know, being very, very customer focused. I mean, just touching a bit on business model. You know, another thing that has really struck me is the fact that, you know, all of these companies, when you research them and look on their website, every single one of them makes a comment about the problems that they are trying to solve for the customers that they are trying to serve, right? So small businesses is a really good example. And if you look at the economic environment and what is happening with small businesses, for example, there's a bunch of companies in the top 10 and in the top 25 who target small businesses, helping them solve problems around insurance coverage, which we know all of the big players struggle to serve small business. It is all a strategic priority. None of them know how to do that in a cost-efficient manner.
Exactly.
And whether it be workers' comp, whether it be employee benefits, whether it be just very, very basic personal liability insurance in the construction sector, these are very, very important needs for underserved segments. The thing that we need to be watching for is, as those segments come under massive strain, how do these insurtechs respond to that strain of these companies to morph their business models more to be more cost efficient, but how to hang on in case some of the funding rounds get delayed, because they are very, very important businesses and the kind of businesses that we really want to see survive, given that 80% of a GDP of most countries is in the small business sector.
Lovely. Well, look, thank you, Penny.
Thank you,
Chris.
Matt.
Well, that's fun. It's nice
Pleasure to be here.
Nice to be in person, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very good to be in person. Wow.
Love it.
Yeah.
So for all those who haven't yet downloaded the Insurtech 100, so head to insurtech100.sonr, SONR.global, and you can get hold of the report there. So months of hard work from the team at Sønr and EY. So thank you for that. Thank you, EY, for this partnership once again this year. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Second year
It's
running.
a privilege.
And again, congratulations on all those who are featured and driving these amazing businesses. So congratulations to all those, and a big thanks to all the judges involved as well. Once again, thanks guys. Have good days.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.